Iron Maiden have been pumping out their wild brand of heavy metal for well over 25 years, with every one of their 13 studio albums and 3 live albums to date becoming major top 10 successes, both at home in the UK and in more than 25 countries around the world. Despite a lengthy recording history and a variety of lineup changes, Maiden have managed to carry their sound into the new millennium. With heavy metal currently enjoying a worldwide resurgence in popularity, Maiden are once again leading the rock revival. The story of Iron Maiden officially began in 1971, when a 15-year-old youth, Steve Harris, learnt to play bass.
Iron Maiden's history goes back to the East End in sort of like mid to late 1970s, where punk was at its prime, and Steve Harris had long hair and didn't fit in visually or musically. I think he was in a band to start with called Gypsy's Kiss, and was playing songs that were written by other members of that band. He started writing his own stuff, which was very typically Maiden, even back in those days, because it had lots of time changes in it, and the members of Gypsy's Kiss were like, well, we can't play this, you know, you've got 3 different time changes, this song is too complicated, you know, from a structural point of view. So he decided that he'd form his own band.
The concept of Iron Maiden was born in 1975, and in the spring of 1976, Harris's new band secured a residency at the Cart and Horses pub in Stratford, in the capital's East End. It was the first of what would be a host of local gigs all over East London, and the band soon built up a strong local following. Martin Blackman was one of the band's earliest fans.
A friend of ours told us about this band because we were all into metal then when we was kids, and there wasn't no places for metal bands. You know, you never heard of a metal band playing in pubs. It's just typical shite bands, you know, cover bands and all this. A friend of ours, Steve Wright, said, come and see this band. They play down the Cart and Horses in Stratford, which is Maryland Point. They're called Iron Maiden. So, like, all of us from the pub, it must have been 8 or 9 of us, we was all like, you know, dressed up the same, all the Levi jacket and, you know, all the hair out here. And we shot down at this pub in Stratford, and there they were, Iron Maiden, and I couldn't believe it, what I heard. I couldn't believe it. It's the first time I've been watching bands, you know, when you go and see a band, but to see actual pub band, that every track was outstanding. I couldn't believe it. Every track they played was just different class. And the lineup then, when we used to see them, there was a guy called Dennis on lead vocals. The drummer, which Den used to call him Uncle Ron, was Ron Rebel. Had Bob Sawyer on guitar, who had a nice bird, by the way. Stevie Harris on bass, and Dave Murray on guitars. We used to go and watch them down the Bridge House. That was probably the best venue because they played there more than anything. And it just happened that the band sort of took us in. Because eventually, Steve Harris and Denise used to come and visit us in our pub, local pub in Leighton, the Law Clyde. They used to come down at nights and visit us. But the thing was, they used to come in as they were on stage, like big boots on and that, and it looked weird, you know? They come in the pub and see us, and everyone's looking at them in the pub, and there's, like, Denise with his great big flares and his platform boots on. It was good fun. And in the end, we got so many people to come and see them. Like, I got my brother, he started coming to see them. Mark O'Malley got all his friends from the post office. So at the end of it all, when we used to go, there was a big crowd of us. But in the beginning, there was only about 8 or 9 of us who used to go and see them. And the funny thing is, talk about headbanging. I've never done so much headbanging. I mean, from the start of the gig to the end. And the amount of beer we used to throw at ourselves was just unreal, you know what I mean? When I used to do the Iron Maiden track, Dennis would get his mouth full of blood capsules, and he'd get a sword and he'd go straight through his mouth like that, and all blood would spurt out everywhere, and the stage was covered in blood. Because actually the flyers they used to give out, right, was Iron Maiden with a picture of a mouth with all blood coming out, you ain't seen nothing yet.
After 6 months, the lineup changed. Vocalist Dennis Wilcock took it upon himself to fire guitarist Dave Murray, who went to join local band Urchin. In time, Dennis also moved on. By 1978, Ron Rebel decided to up and go. Harris went down to an Urchin gig and persuaded Dave Murray to rejoin Maiden, and recruited ex-Smiler drummer Doug Sampson before setting off to look for a new singer. Eventually, a mate of Steve Harris's recommended a singer by the name of Paul Di'Anno.
We had a mate we used to see down a local pub, a bloke called Trevor Searle. So Trev knew Steve and all that, and see Maiden, he sort of said, oh, they're looking for a singer. And I went down to see him, and we walked out of there after about 10 minutes. We was laughing our asses off. Because we're punks and that weren't really our scene, you know what I mean? Anyway, after a couple of months later, I sort of met up with Steve and that and started talking and that, went round his house. Persuaded me to go down for an interview, like a rehearsal and that, and have a jam. And I'm sitting there trying to sing songs I've got no idea what they are, playing by Deep Purple or something. So we done that. I sort of knew the song vaguely, but just sort of ummed it and awed it and went through. And then Steve come round in the Sunday afternoon and sort of said, well, you know, we tried a few other guys, but you got the job if you want it. And I'm like, well, I don't really give a fuck, to be honest with you. Wasn't that interested, but then I see Steve a bit more, and then we went around his house and we started to write together. And as soon as we started writing, there was something there.
When I first met Paul, it was about 1970 at George Mitchell School. Must have been about 11 or 12 then. He was just like us, hated school, like we all did at that age. And we used to do the same old things. Used to muck about, bunk off, do what kids do at that sort of age. And then when we moved on to County High, Leighton County High, which is in Essex Road, which was the next school up, it was exactly the same thing. We were always getting in trouble, Paul Taylor. Always getting in trouble. He was well known for it, like we all was. He was a good lad, yeah. I liked him. Like, you know, sometimes you might have thought he was telling a few porkies, but you know what I mean. But like we always used to tell porkies when we was kids that age. You know what I mean? Yeah, he was quite a nice bloke. Didn't know he was going to be a singer, though. Never had that. Didn't think he had that in him at all. We don't see it at that age. You know what I mean?
Another well-known EastEnder, Gary Bushell, then writing for the weekly music magazine Sounds, was an early supporter of Maiden.
Obviously, I remember Paul Di'Anno very much because he was such a big personality. He was your archetypal wide boy, very cocky, very funny, always had his eye on the Maiden chance. Not all of his stories were true, it has to be said. He had prone to exaggerate. He was prone to play up to whoever the audience was. I mean, so the first time he met me, because he knew I'd written a book on two-tone. He told me how much he loved two-toners and how much he liked the Cockney Rejects, because I'd managed the Cockney Rejects. So he would give you whatever story you thought you wanted to hear. But he was still hugely entertaining.
As the band continued to play locally, Blackman was amazed to hear that Di'Anno had joined his favourite band.
Well, I must have been, when was he late? Must have been about 17, 18. I was come out of a pub in Walthamstow and I walked into a chip shop. And there was a bit of aggro going on there with the bloke behind the chippy. I looked in there and there was Taylor in there. I go, God blimey, Paul, I ain't seen you for years, blah, blah, blah. I was chatting away. And he was all pissed, and he was pissed as well. And he was talking to me, and I said, what are you up to? He said, I'm in a band, I'm a singer now. And I thought, I'm not one of his, like, he's not telling me Porky's here, is he? And he said, no, I'm a singer in a band. I said, I didn't know you could sing. He said, yeah, I can sing, I'm not a bad singer. And it weren't until I found out who he was with, I was shocked, you know what I mean? Because we always knew him as, you know, just like one of the boys, but we couldn't understand it when he was a singer, and did he have a voice on him? It was unreal. You know what I mean?
With Paul installed, the band kept the heavy metal cause alive, playing regular gigs at London pubs such as the Bridge House in Canning Town and the Ruskin Arms in Manor Park.
Well, the Ruskin Arms obviously is like the bastion of Iron Maiden. That's where we started in like Manor Park, East London, and the governor there at the time was Joe Lucy. He was like a welterweight champion, like a Lonsdale belt holder. I used to box up there myself in the gym upstairs, so we went and played up there. And it was fantastic, and we went up there. We was our own crowds in East London, you know, people would come from all over, come and see us, and it was sold out, it was great, it was like something new, it was all happening, you know, it was quite exciting. So we'd put on more of a show than ever, and we had our geezer Dave Lights, who'd done our lighting for us. He'd done all these, like, all the flash bombs and everything in bloody orange crates on the front of the stage by the monitors. We got upstairs, I got a pair of leather trousers on, I spent 60 quid on them fuckers, and I wore them for the first night, and he let the flash bombs off, and they all melted and burnt all my bollocks. That was the first night we played back at the Ruskin as Iron Maiden properly. So loads of stuff goes on. You forget loads, but somebody will remind you of it. So they was all haphazard, but I think the sheer enthusiasm of the band and the sheer wanting and love of playing and the love we was getting from the fans, and we're giving back equally as much. And we had a lot of fans even back then, in them days. When the album came out, it just went astronomical, but it was unbelievable. You felt, I don't know, I think I could safely say for the first time in my life I sort of felt I was worth something. That was cool. I went home feeling that there is life after drudgery, if you know what I mean, or a life on the dole in East London, a life without nothing, you know, basically. You can actually make something work for yourself, not still thinking about, oh, we're going to be the best thing since sliced bread, but like, you can actually do this, you know, and even if you went back and worked in a factory after that, at least you have a couple of days a week where you're playing and, like, you get over that, don't you? Like, it's great.
He's an absolute nutcase. He's a likeable nutcase, a very likeable nutcase, if you get on the right side of him. But he's always been a bit of a loose cannon, which I don't think he'd mind me or anyone else saying, because by his own admission, you know, he is. So that's Paul as a person. Paul as a singer, outstanding. One of my favourite vocalists of all time. And can still cut it now like he did in Iron Maiden. I mean, in certain respects, his voice has got stronger. I think he had a real kind of punk edge to his voice, but he also was one of the pioneers of that kind of high-powered falsetto sort of scream, which is inherent on the first two Iron Maiden albums. Everyone talks about the raw kind of punk sound, or the rawer, punkier sound that the first two albums had. And I don't think that was necessarily in Iron Maiden's sound before Di'Anno became their lead singer. I think he turned up with his kind of Barrow Boy East End attitude. He had short hair, and although they were always credited as being kind of a metal band, he certainly brought out more of a punk edge to them, which you can hear on the two albums that he made.
By late 1978, having established a strong local following, the band soon realised they needed a demo tape. In December, Maiden went into Spacewood Studios near Cambridge to record Prowler, Invasion, Strange World and Iron Maiden.
First time I heard of Iron Maiden is when they started turning up at #1 in the heavy metal charts that Sounds used to run. And Sounds was the rock paper in the 70s. Overtaking Enemy, Outselling Melody Maker, it was the big one. And we used to run a heavy metal chart. Iron Maiden started coming up. No one had heard of this band, Iron Maiden, yet they kept being #1 week after week after week. And this chart was being done at one of the few rock, heavy metal rock discos that was around at the time, a place called the Sound House, which was like a sweatbox on the side of a pub in Kingsbury, run by a guy called Neil Kay, who was a peculiar-looking man, like a sawn-off catweasel. But he would encourage young bands to give their demo tapes in. And Maiden's demo tape, I think they recorded it New Year's Eve 1978. And for a night, the early months of '79, they were being played at the Sound House, and the kids loved it. They couldn't get enough of it, and every week they were making Prowler #1, and the other tracks were all in the top 10 too. So we thought we'd better look into this. You know, something's going on here, and we sent down Jeff Barton, and Alan Lewis came up with the title "New Wave of British Heavy Metal" for this phenomenon that was happening there, of which, as we know now, Maiden were not only the front runners but also the definitive article.
When we did the Sound House tapes, these were all Steve's songs, Invasion and Prowler and stuff like that. So, you know, these are songs I've just learned. So we went into Cambridge Spacewood Studios to go and record it. And as I said to you earlier, that was the first time I'd ever caught a dose because we didn't have anywhere to sleep. So we went to a pub and pulled some nurses And I was the only one who ended up with one, and I'm sleeping in her bed, in her quarters, and all the rest of the band were on the floor. So that was quite interesting. But it was my second ever recording experience as well, and it was really cool. But I listen to these things nowadays, I'm like, God, I had no idea whatsoever as to what I'm doing now. But that was really cool. We'd done an EP. The EP sold out. We'd done 2,000 copies. We sold them out within about a day of them being released. So we then suddenly started realising there might be something here with the band. Yeah. That was it. Lyric writing. I sat down with Steve. He had most of the ideas, but I sat down. I had a rough idea of what I wanted with Running Free. I wanted the old Gary Glitter drum beat on it, so it was pretty commercial to really what it was going to do, but I had this idea and I knew it was going to work, and it did work, so I wrote the lyrics to that. Remember Tomorrow, just before my grandfather died, I wrote the lyrics to that because it means something to me. I think until I grew up a little bit more, I mean, I will say one thing, I am a good lyric writer. I do write nowadays as well a lot. It's not like written by a monkey, there's a lot of thought goes into this, and it's normally a little bit political, but them days, though, it wasn't so much. When I wrote Killers, though, I still had that in my head. When I wrote the track Killers on the second album, the actual lyric is like a three-way split. It's about the guy who done it, what the public says, and you know, and the aftermath of it all. So I tried to sort of keep things interesting.
When Di'Anno joined, things started kicking off in terms of record company interest and things like that, because I know that in the early days, record company scouts would see Iron Maiden and they'd say to Steve Harris, well, you've got something here, but we're not going to sign it because you don't fit in, because it was all about the Sex Pistols and so on and so forth. So although by no means Paul Di'Anno turned them into a punk band, there was kind of a crossover element, I think, that he brought that maybe made record companies think, wow, look at this front man, you know, maybe we could sell this to the punk kids and to a whole nother audience that should be out there waiting.
The band's demo tape also came to the attention of Rod Smallwood of the MAM agency. After listening to it, Smallwood offered his services as their manager and subsequently booked a series of gigs all over the UK to allow the band to build up a nationwide following. He also arranged dates in or near central London to get record companies to check out the group. One such gig was a sold-out showcase at the Marquee Club in central London, a concert that was ignored by just about every major label, except for EMI Records. In December 1979, EMI Records signed up Iron Maiden to their roster of rock acts. Over the Christmas-New Year period, the band underwent even more lineup changes. Clive Burr and Dennis Stratton took over on drums and guitar respectively.
They contacted me. I met them up at the old ship in Wardour Street next to the old Marquee, and we had a long chat and introduced ourselves to one another, and it went on from there. They gave me some demos of what they'd done, that when they were due to start recording on the first album. I went to a rehearsal with them, but it was pretty awkward with the rehearsal because I didn't have a drummer either. So we were sitting in this rehearsal studio. Paul Di'Anno came in, Dave Murray came in, me and Steve were sitting there and really just running through different tunes. One of the tracks that they put to me was Phantom of the Opera, and so I took it away. I worked on the song, and then I started working on the harmonies of the songs to make them just sound. I've always been in the harmony guitar bands. Years before with Wishbone Ash and bands that I've worked with, there have always been two guitars. So I worked on the harmonies of Phantom of the Opera. We went to a rehearsal, played it, and they said, brilliant, great, we'll go for it. But at the same time, they were looking for a drummer. I brought down a good friend of mine, Johnny Richardson, who suffers a little bit from his ears, so he didn't last very long because the rehearsals were quite loud. Clive Burr, me and Clive had known one another for many years before Maiden. I bumped into him at a pub in the East End, and I just said to him that I was joining the band and they were looking for a drummer. So I took him along to the rehearsal, they liked Clive, and then the rest is history, you know, that's what we started working on.
By the end of the decade, they had finally formed as a credible and commercial band. And in early 1980, they got down to the arduous business of recording their first album, Iron Maiden, with Will Malone in the producer's chair. In February 1980, while the band were out promoting their album on the Metal for Mothers tour, EMI released their first single, Running Free. Despite receiving almost no radio airplay whatsoever, it totally exceeded record company expectations, leaping into the charts at number 34.
We were told that the album, when it was released for advanced orders on EMI, we were told it would probably go in top 10, hopefully top 5. It went straight in at number 4, I think, and I remember walking around Manchester Square where EMI's office is, and they were all hanging out the windows, all shouting because they knew that we were coming to the record company. And it was just amazing because that was when I sort of really realised the fact that the following they had in this country, they've built it up, as I said earlier, by doing the groundwork and by attracting audiences from little clubs all over North England, Scotland, anywhere you want to go. They'd built up that fan, hysteria, so that when the album was going to come out, everyone had it on advanced orders. And the magic of getting an album in the charts is that if you can get as many advanced orders as you can, it's all sold on that 1 week. So it just went straight in, and we just couldn't believe it. It was unbelievable. It was a growing up stage. I think it was that day when the album went into number 4. I can't remember what we were doing. We was either on tour or we was rehearsing or we were doing something. It just meant that the band just suddenly looked at one another and thought, we're up there now with the big boys. So now we've got to be recognised and we've got to keep it up there. And that's the day we sort of grew up and went, we're not a little band anymore, and everyone was over the moon. At that time, everything seemed to take off, and it just went absolutely potty. You weren't at home. It was just a case of you never knew where you were going to be the next day. And when we went on tour and it came out, and they were cutting short the tour because there was another tour coming up that was more important. So really, it was one of those things that your feet never touched the ground.
With Running Free entering the top 40, Iron Maiden were invited to perform on Top of the Pops.
Iron Maiden's first Top of the Pops performance is great as well because Running Free it went into the top 40, but it didn't come in that high in comparison with their latter material. But they got on Top of the Pops somehow, and they turned up and just assumed that everyone played live. And of course, in those days, that wasn't the case. And I don't know the full story of how it went down, but they turned up and said, right, we want to play completely live, and Top of the Pops were like, oh, no, you can't do that. But I know for a fact that Paul Di'Anno has told me that I don't know if they insisted or he insisted, but certainly there was some sort of like collective might that said, no, we're Iron Maiden and we're going to play live, and they did. But as Paul tell you, it was a live performance, but in comparison with their live shows in that Top of the Pops studio, they were actually playing very quietly.
And we had loads of trouble in the studio because the Top of the Pops studio is so quiet. I remember we were on the same night as Shakin' Stevens, and Shakin' Stevens was doing This Old House, and he was on the next stage, and he was dancing, and the squeak from his trainers was louder than the track that was being played. And we sort of looked at him and thought, if we can only hear the squeaking of the trainers while he's dancing, what are we going to be like? So what we had to do was dampen all the kit down and the amps. We had them on sort of number half and distortion, and we just tried to get, but we did it. It sounded great because we did it in the end live. But it was like doing your first gig at the local pub. It's always been an ambition, and it's always been, your little dream to go, we're on Top of the Pops, you know what I mean? So that was like, because we were still very young and naive a little bit, it was fun.
We're up there on stage, we don't know what the hell's going on, we're saying, well, we're only going to play live, we won't whine, we won't do nothing like that. We're all going up there all like levered up and like fucking West Ham scarf and everything, and then you can feel the hate coming from the audience. These kids all want to just go, oh yeah, like dancing around. They get mowed down like idiots by the cameras on wheels. You know, they get shunted around like cattle, and we're looking over the other stage after us, ready to play Spandau Ballet. And they're all like looking at us, and we're like, you tossers, like, fuck off, you know, like you make-up poncy wankers. Like, I was like, those really nice guys in the end, to be honest with you. But it was an experience, but not one really wanting to repeat.
The band considered Running Free and Remember Tomorrow to be two of their strongest recordings.
Well, the one I'm probably the most of is Remember Tomorrow, because I wrote it for my grandfather, because that was one of his sayings, always like, things look bad now, remember tomorrow, it'll be better, you know, so that's always stuck with me. I've kept by that. That's a good little creed to go by. Running Free, it's just like youthful rebellion. Unfortunately, I've not been able to drop that. Even still, I'm still the same sort of person. Just have it, you know, like, you might be dead tomorrow. Go for your life, you know, like, it's one of the things. And it's quite ironic, I've done that, like, just 16 with a pickup truck, out of money, out of luck, and then started doing the thing about LA, and then 10 years later, I'm in jail out there, in nightmares. So it's like, it does come true. Don't do it, kids, it's not good.
I think Remember Tomorrow was always a nice melodic song. I'm not into too much madness in the songs. Phantom of the Opera was always one of my favourites. But it's like anything, it's like Running Free. When we started working on that, they said, this is going to be the single. So it was like, you know, when you're working on the song and you've got the chorus coming up, I changed the end slightly because it was a single. You know that it has to be slightly a bit more catchy, you know, a bit more sort of like commercial.
In the spring of 1980, the group began working with producer Tony Platt, then known for his work with AC/DC.
The whole thing was quite an interesting exercise because this third-party song, if you like, Women in Uniform, had been introduced as a result, I guess, of discussions between the record company, the publishers, who were Zomba, and the management, Rod Smallwood. And this was a song that was originally done by an Australian band called Skyhooks. And it's, you know, it's a pretty good song. And you know, Iron Maiden are very much the product of some extremely skillful marketing and management. And this was really a very good attempt to get something that would get reasonable radio play and at least get the name known, you know, even if it wasn't necessarily what they would consider to be ultimately the most credible music for their particular audience. So there were certain stresses, I think, that would be a good way of putting it, when we went in to do these three songs. Obviously the other two, Invasion and Phantom, were very much, you know, hardcore Maiden songs. But this particular track, Women in Uniform, was considerably slower, and it required a vocal that was not in the same key as the rest of the instrumentation. It really needed something that sailed above a little bit. So I guess it was an interesting moment, that, really, because I really believe that was the point at which they started to realise that a different singer might be more appropriate at some point in the future. Steve was always going to play as many notes as he possibly could, and as, you know, as fast as he possibly could, to generate that flurry of excitement. Clive is probably one of the heaviest drummers that I've ever recorded, and was just as solid as a rock in terms of laying it down. And was very good because he was a very economical drummer. He wasn't all over the drum kit all the time, which left a bit of space. Dave Murray's, he's quite unique because, you know, he's a very unassuming sort of personality, and you wouldn't expect a lot of this fiery guitar that comes out of him to come out. Again, you know, we're not talking about virtuoso stuff here, but it does what it says on the tin, if you like. Paul Di'Anno, I never really saw quite how his voice fitted into it. I found that very difficult. He was very resistant to trying anything different, and that did make life a little bit difficult. Dennis Stratton, I found a very personable guy. I listened to some of his songs after he'd left the band, and I thought they were really very good indeed. But he was almost too musical for the band, and you know, returning to that thing I said before about slight embarrassment, I think he was always slightly embarrassed that it wasn't quite musical enough for him.
Following the band's recording session with Flat, Maiden embarked on their first ever European tour, supporting US megastars Kiss. The tour marked Maiden's arrival as international rock stars.
We were pretty sensible on the road, yeah, right. Me and Dave Murray got married in Yorkshire in a hotel, which had all wedding paraphernalia up the stairs to the hotels. So we got Dave in the bridesmaid's outfit, and I married him because he was pissed at the bar. So that was fun. We got thrown out of that. We'd done about £10,000 worth of damage to the Hilton Hotel in Berlin, because we went out there and we used to have this thing. Do you remember those stupid little guns? You put them like little dried peas in, Sakiden guns. You used to sit there, yeah, we used to play Commandos. And I had an Uzi one, which is fucking great. You spray about fucking 2,000 of fuckers. So we used to, you couldn't stand up, you had to do it on your knees. Everyone come home from a gig and you're pissed. So you're like, you've got to crawl on your knees. We had the whole floor of the hotel, so all on our knees, everything. I fucking shot, I think it was, I shot Dave or something up the arse. And they'll come and run in to my room and set the fucking fire extinguisher off. It was one of them dust ones. The carpet, beds, fucking all the curtains, everything. They said the Hilton Berlin, they give us about 10 grand bill the next day. Jesus Christ. And the rest of them are a bit X-rated, so I can't go there on them ones. It's in my mind the most was in 1980 when we played the Reading Festival. And we went on stage and there's like 45,000 people there. We was second from top. I think it was UFO or White Snake was headline that night. We went out on stage and we was playing and the crowds were going absolutely mental. But when we started Remember Tomorrow, they started sort of quietly and it was dark by then, the lights were on. 45,000 lighters up in the air. Me and Steve looked at each other and I think we both choked. We couldn't actually quite, sort of a little bit behind the song because I couldn't actually open my mouth to sing because I thought I was going to cry. And Steve was the same. I think he was choked up. It meant so much to us because it was England first, you know what I mean? I don't think any of us, even in our wildest dreams, thought it would ever become the way it was, you know what I mean? We were just all happy to play, as I still am now. I don't care if I ever sell another record. I'm just happy to go up on stage and play. I love it. That's what it's all about. For me, that's probably the worst drug in the world. To have that buzz of getting up there. If you've got one person or 1,000 or 1 million people up there like having it on stage and they're into it, you've done your job. You've done the business. So that's what I think. That's what all of us are always just wanting to play. Just wanting to play live and get out and let people hear us. Thoughts of superstars and rock stars and all that, I think is probably about the furthest from anybody in Maiden's mind. I mean, we're all quite normal people. You know, I absolutely hate anything to do with all that shit, you know, so, and I'm sure most of the rest of the boys are as well. I don't think their views or values have changed that much either.
At a time when rock stars had become remote and unreachable, you know, you had all these people playing stadiums and they were like little gods in a distance. Maiden were always your mates. They were your mates who could play. But they were no different from you. They never set out to be any different from you. They always like living their dream and their dream was touching your dream and it was fantastic.
Eddie, the Maiden mascot, had by now been introduced as a permanent feature of the band's live set.
Well, Eddie was first thought of by Dave Lights. In the early days we had it was like a skull with two lights sticking out and a bit of smoke coming out of his mouth. Pretty cheap, but then again, 1979, that was your backdrop. When we went on to Eddie, Rod Smallwood kept calling him Fred. So me and Dave Lights would look at one another and say, why does he keep calling him Fred? Basically, the reason he was Eddie was because it was Eddie the Head, because there was only an head there, a head. There wasn't a body, just a head. And so that was where he got the name from, Eddie the Head. But Rod wanted to call him Fred.
Maiden always had the shock rock aspect to them, you know, the blood belching out of various backdrops and things like that. In the earliest days, the earliest backdrop was just a mask they got from an art college, which they put on. It was an ugly thing, but the mask became known as Eddie from a gag that was doing the rounds at the time. It's not a very good gag, but I'm happy to tell it to you if you want to hear it. It was about a boy who was unfortunately born without a body. He was just a head, and they used to call him Eddie the Head. And the doctors, when he was born, said, "Don't worry, I'm sure in about 6 years' time I'll be able to supply a body to him." So on his 6th birthday, his dad turned to him, "Eddie," he said, "I've got a wonderful surprise for you." And Eddie said, "Oh no, not another fucking hat." So that was the gag. This was the gag, the very bad gag, that the reason Eddie is called Eddie was from Eddie the Head, the gag, and then Derek Riggs got hold of the idea and developed him as this monstrous beast. It was marvellous, really, because when you think of a band where the personnel are changing, it doesn't matter so much if the image is what you know the band for. You know the Iron Maiden Eddie more than you know the individual members of the band, especially to start with. Then Eddie started to make appearances on stage. This was the great thing, and at the start it was just a bloke wearing an Eddie outfit, and it wasn't. And then they constructed this huge 12-foot Eddie, and the whole myth about Eddie grew. I think they only got knocked back once with Eddie, and that was when they tried to do. They had Eddie biting the head off Ozzy Osbourne in the early 80s, and I think Ozzy's lawyers threatened to sue, and so they had to get rid of that T-shirt. But the Eddie figure, of course, was involved in quite a number of controversies. The biggest one being the one where he appeared to kill Mrs. Thatcher. The other Iron Maiden, there was an Eddie, which caused I think a full page in the Daily Mirror about that. And then when the single Twilight Zone came out, it appeared to be Eddie trying to reach a young lady sitting there in a negligee. And what the people who moaned about that and said it was sexist didn't realise is if they listened to the lyrics, he was her boyfriend and he died, he was trying to get in touch. But I mean, he was all Eddie thing always generated controversy.
On returning from the Kiss tour in October, second guitarist Dennis Stratton left Maiden. His replacement came in the shape of ex-Urchin guitar man Adrian Smith.
We was on the Kiss tour, and Rod Smallwood had this thing in his head, which he had to have the whole band together every day. It was like in a goldfish bowl. Because I'd had previous experience touring with other bands, I used to say to them, if you try and push the band together all the time, they will get fed up with one another's company. You can't live, eat, breathe 24/7 with one person or 4 people. You will end up, arguing. But he wanted the band everywhere we went together, we all had to be together, and it was like he was worried in case one of us disappeared or whatever. And while we was on the Kiss tour, I had a few, not arguments, but I had a few discussions with Rod about if I wanted to go and do something. Like, I used to share rooms with Dave Lights, the lighting designer, Dave Beasley, great mate, and I love the crew, Loopy on the drums and Steve the guitar tech, but me and Dave Lights were good friends, and Rod seemed to take it upon himself that he didn't like the idea of me being with one of the crew. It had to be the band. And then we had a long discussion in the hotel on the Kiss tour about the music that I listened to. So my only answer to that is the same as anybody, is that when you're on a tour with a heavy metal band and you're playing heavy metal every night and you're listening to Kiss playing heavy metal and Maiden playing heavy metal, when you go back to your hotel room and you might want to have a little drink or a shower and you just want to chill out and you just want to relax, it doesn't matter what music you listen to. But Rod seemed to take it upon himself that it was that kind of music. If I wanted to listen to the Eagles, or if I wanted to listen to Little River Band or George Benson, he found it annoying, the fact that it could interfere with my contribution to Maiden. And then at the end of the day, it started creeping into the personality thing, and it just slowly got worse. So when we came back from the Kiss tour, Rod said, we need to have a little chat. So me and Steve went up to Rod Small's office, and we sat there, and he said, it's just, you know, you're not into the band 100%. And I said to him, well, I am. So he said, you're not into the band as much as what we'd like to see. So my question to him was, are you satisfied with the guitar player? And he said, yes. And I said, and are you satisfied with the vocal contribution? And he said, yes, more than enough. So I said, so if the job's being done, what is my personal life got to do with it? What, you know, you're coming to my house, and you're telling me what I can listen to, what TV to watch. And he said, no, he said, if you're listening to different stuff like that, you can't be focused on Iron Maiden. So we disagreed, and that was it.
With Adrian Smith installed, the band then began work on a new studio album, Killers, with Martin Birch producing. Displaying a harder approach to its predecessor, it charted in the UK at number 12 and went gold in several major territories. In May, Maiden embarked on their Killer World Tour. The band played in 15 countries and made their US debut, opening for metal titans Judas Priest.
We've done the Judas Priest British Steel tour over here, and then when they've done their next album, after that, the Point of Entry tour, they went to America to go on tour, and they wasn't selling the tickets they needed to sell. So they invited us to go on. Now, by then, this was the second Maiden album, Killers, for us. The first Iron Maiden made a lot of headway. I think we charted about number 10 in America, something like that. So we was there, but we hadn't actually played. So the hype's all built up and everything. But you're talking about, I think what done it for us is, wow, this is unbelievable, is when we done it in England. I mean, England first always. And you sit and you're like, my God, you know, like, we're all little wankers from, like, East London. Like, what's going on? Love him playing and all that, but it's getting worse, you know, like, you know, it's getting a bit out of control. I think we was all taken aback a bit. But it opens your eyes a bit when you go to America and you get out there and we're playing like Long Beach Arena and stuff. I had support to UFO and stuff like that. And then along with the Priest shows and that, it was amazing. I think it hit every one of us there, and then this band is actually worthwhile, worth doing. We do have something, and fucking hell, we love playing. And, you know, that was it. I think that was all that mattered.
This is how true to their roots they were in the early days. They never used to like American beans. American beans back in the 80s always used to come with these terrible bits of pork in them and things that shouldn't be there. So Maiden used to ship over, for the long tours, they'd ship over Heinz baked beans, and they'd ship over Ruddles beer because you couldn't get proper beer in the States back then. And they just wanted to keep it as English as they could. They used to cook up the beans in the hotel rooms using the element from the electric kettle, stick it in, 20 minutes later, serve it up. Beans a la Maiden, they used to call it. Fantastic stuff.
However, as the Killer tour came to an end that September, it was clear that singer Paul Di'Anno's days were numbered.
Paul was great for Maiden at a certain stage. You know, there was probably a lot of kids out there that preferred Paul's voice to Bruce's or anyone else. But me personally, I've always said to Rod Smallwood and to Steve Harris that if you're going to compete against American bands, you know, you want your James Dio and your Dave Lee Roths and Sammy Hagers of the world, the voice has got to be up there. It's got to be up there with the best, with your Robert Plants. Paul struggled with the range, although he suited the band at an early stage. I also felt that Paul struggled slightly with his stage presence in communicating with a crowd. You know, when you've got them in the palm of your hand, they can eat out your hand, but Paul, he just needed to sort of like gel a little bit with the audience.
You see, the thing is, Di'Anno suited the rougher end of Maiden. When it was like playing very small places, and he had the foot totally suited to that. Now, I don't know what reason is being given for his departure now, but certainly at the time it was claimed that a lot of the problem was with various rock and roll pursuits, which were weakening his voice and weakening his performance. So anyway, it was just by pure piece of luck that the guy they brought in, who was known as Bruce at the time, Bruce Dickinson, was perfect for America. Because you wouldn't have got the airplay You wouldn't have got the radio play in the States with Di'Arno's voice because it's a bit too rough for American radio. Dickinson, on the other hand, had the perfect voice, and it in some ways, as much of a character as Di'Arno was, in a different way, but a much more polished performer. I mean, we used to call him the air raid siren, kind of power of them lungs, and he was very physical on stage. Di'Arno, for all the qualities he brought to the band, no one could say that Dickinson was a disappointment.
I think Paul Di'Arno quite regularly admits that he was thinking about leaving Iron Maiden, and Iron Maiden were thinking about him leaving at the same time. Because he'd basically become too much of a loose cannon. I think the main problem was that they were having to cancel too many gigs because his lifestyle meant that his voice wasn't up to standard. And Steve Harris has always been, I would say it's unfair to say a hard taskmaster, but quite a perfectionist, you know, and always says, you know, he's never even smoked a cigarette, let alone taken any drugs, and you know, drinks if he wants to drink. So certainly I think Paul Di'Arno's lifestyle in 1981 wasn't fitting well with the rest of the band.
The second album, Killers, as I said, was going more towards the metal side and less of the punk side. And I was a bit unhappy, even though I wrote the title track with Steve, Killers itself. There was other songs on there where I had issues with, and even though like I didn't leave for about another year and a half later, but you're touring and stuff, so I'm very unhappy. I just didn't feel right in myself, so obviously to make it more interesting for myself, I was drinking more alcohol, doing more drugs, because you seem to blot out the memory of that something I loved was turned into something I didn't want, but it was being successful, you know what I mean? I knew there and then that I didn't want to go down that route, so to blot out some of this stuff, you do these things, you know. I wasn't the only one doing drugs at the time, but, you know, like, I was doing it, and I was very, very unhappy, and I think they knew I was unhappy, and it came to a head, and we were going to sit there. I think Steve was about to say something about, like, we want you to either straighten it up or go, and I wanted to go anyway, so we came to the conclusion, OK, I'm out of here, man, that's it, I'm gone.
I think Paul Di'Arno will be remembered as the guy that kick-started it for Iron Maiden and sang on what many regard as two of their best albums. Maybe not the best albums, but certainly if you ask a big Maiden fan to name, say, even their top three, one of those albums quite often will be one of the ones that Paul sang on. People have told me stories about being at school at the time and people coming in wearing black wristbands because it was reported in the NME that Paul Di'Arno had left Iron Maiden. One of Paul's last performances with the band was at the Reading Festival in 1981 when Iron Maiden headlined one of the nights. On that actual festival site, Samson were also playing, which was Bruce's band at the time. And I think it was actually during Iron Maiden's set, their manager was actually talking to Bruce about, might be a change coming, do you want to join the band? And certainly, you know, the initial part of the deal was done at the Reading Festival site in 1981. And it did propel Iron Maiden to a different stratosphere, really, Bruce joining, and more to the point, that Number of the Beast album. For as much good as Paul had done the band for the first 2 years on the first two albums, when Number of the Beast was released with a new singer, Iron Maiden couldn't really have wished for anything more. At that stage, having built up the momentum, which Paul was an integral part of, to change singers could have been critical, to be honest. And it was a big chance to take, and obviously a lot of the songs were already written before Bruce came on board, but it was the right album with the right songs at the right time, and indeed the right singer with really a completely different singing style, but someone who managed to, you know, do justice to those songs that Paul had sang on the first two albums, and certainly, you know, scream his heart out on the stuff that was to be featured on Number of the Beast, which to many people is the classic Iron Maiden album.
Once more, a replacement was close at hand. Bruce Dickinson, the vocalist of fellow British rockers Samson, was disenchanted with his band, and in October 1981, he was accepted as the new vocalist of Iron Maiden.
But when I left Iron Maiden, they got Bruce in as vocalist. We'd known Bruce as well from Samson and stuff like that as well. He's a bloody good singer. He used to look like Bill Oddie in them days, funny enough. He used to have the beard. But It's a great single. It was different. It was a change, different vocal tones and things like that, and they sort of definitely heavied up a bit more metal. So it was cool. So you know, I was pretty happy that they'd done that. I think that's one of the greatest albums they've done, actually. Number of the Beast. So you know, it's different change, different style. It's good. It's worked. Definitely works.
I think really the success of Iron Maiden took off when Bruce joined the band, because that was the final component that really made sense of it. And whereas there were some, you know, really hardcore fans before that who could maybe see what was going on behind it, once Bruce started making sense of the top line, if you like, I think that's the point at which Iron Maiden really took off.
You know, when I was a kid, my dad used to say, look, I don't care what you become, you know, when you get a job. I don't care if you're a road sweeper or a dustman. But as long as you're the best road sweeper or the best dustman or the best whatever, that's all that matters.
I think without any doubt that the album that made the difference, that actually transformed Maiden into a true international band, was The Number of the Beast, because this was the one that really broke in America first. Almost certainly due to the fact that Run to the Hills had been such a great song with the MTV video, where they were one of the first people to work to the MTV thing, and it was a great video for Run to the Hills, and it was touching on the Native Americans, and it was you know, it really did capture the psyche.
In 1982, the band were engaged in the sell-out British leg of the Beast on the Road tour, when the first single from the new album, Run to the Hills, gave the band their first UK top 10 hit.
Really, from Number of the Beast onwards, Iron Maiden could do no wrong for about 10 years in terms of the quality of songs they were releasing and the amount of fans that they had. Every album was going top 10, every single was going top 10. And this was always off the back of, you know, virtually no media exposure whatsoever. They get covers in, you know, what few metal magazines there were around, but they certainly never get played on the radio, apart from begrudgingly when their single was the highest new entry at number 3 or whatever. And they had some more lineup changes. I mean, Clive Burr, the original drummer, went after Number of the Beast, and Nico McBrain came in for the Peace of Mind album. Of course, Nico is still with them now. But really, going through that time in the 80s, you went from like Number of the Beast, which was an absolute classic, Peace of Mind. Bruce Dickinson will tell you that Number of the Beast and Peace of Mind are his two favourite Iron Maiden albums.
In 1984, Power Slave hit the streets and went straight into the album charts at number 2, before the group's groundbreaking World Slavery Tour began.
Iron Maiden were also a really great live spectacle in the 80s. Some people might view it as being a bit Spinal Tap, but I mean, you know, they did it well. The World Slavery Tour, which was the tour that the Live After Death album was born out of, you know, immense stage set based on the Power Slave album with these mummies, and, you know, obviously you've always had kind of the 18-foot Eddie walking around. And it was, you know, a 90-minute, 2-hour, however long set they played. Great spectacle, great heavy metal anthems, and 5 guys, as it was at that time, on the stage really playing their heart out, you know, and you got real value for money. Every penny that your ticket cost was worth it, because they played well, Bruce sang well, the stage set was amazing, Eddie came on. Occasionally they ripped his brains out and tried to kill him and do stuff like that, but every element of it gave you a story to come away from that gig and talk about.
Following some 200 shows, the band's World Slavery trek came to an exhausting conclusion in July 1985. Their long-awaited 6th studio album, Somewhere in Time, was released in September 1986, and with lengthy tours in between, they then released Seventh Son of a Seventh Son in 1988.
It was different. There were more synths on it, there were more keyboards on it. Iron Maiden were accused of selling out on it. You know, you had fans in bands like Metallica and Slayer and Anthrax, all of who got into early Maiden, and they were formed by those kind of bands. You know, they were sparked creatively by that kind of music. They found Seventh Son. A lot of them found Seventh Son to be weaker than they perhaps wanted, But in terms of creativity, this was their best one. You know, they had their best songs on it. They came up with a string of classics like The Evil That Men Do, Infinite Dreams was on that album, and also the title track was another epic. It was their best up to that point. It was a long song. It went on and on and on, but it was clearly showing that Maiden had developed so much from their early years. You know, on the first two records, you know, they were basically writing hard rock songs, you know, which had a start, a middle, and an end, and that, you know, that was all over in, you know, a very quick period of time. This time, up to this point, it was clear that from Seventh Son of a Seventh Son, the title track and the whole album, Iron Maiden had developed massively.
Confirming Maiden's position as Britain's premier metal act, the band had no album scheduled for 1989 and were able to look forward to a real break before the start of the 1990s. In January 1990, the band started work on a new album, No Prayer for the Dying. Work had barely begun when guitar man Adrian Smith revealed that he wanted to leave and form his own rock outfit. Fortunately, a solution was once again close at hand, with ex-Gillan and White Spirit guitarist Yannick Gers joining the Maiden ranks. However, another change of lineup was to take place with the departure of vocalist Bruce Dickinson after the 1992 album Fear of the Dark.
A lot of people see the 90s as kind of the most dodgy period, I guess, for want of a better term, for Iron Maiden. They'd had tremendous success in the 80s, runs of great albums. 1990 was No Prayer for the Dying, 92, Fear of the Dark, which were the last two albums of phase one of Bruce, I guess. And I think No Prayer for the Dying had Bring Your Daughter to the Slaughter on it, right, which gave Iron Maiden their only #1. They released it the first week of January when no one else is putting anything else out. They always knew that for the last 10 years they've had enough of a fan base who will buy the single on the first week of release to get it probably the highest new entry. So it's a pretty safe bet considering you had no other competition that by putting out your single first week of January you were going to go to #1. And then there was Fear of the Dark. And I think around that time, there was probably quite a bit of tension in the band. Bruce had already started doing solo albums, and I don't know this, but maybe he'd started drifting apart from other band members. And certainly before they completed the Fear of the Dark tour, he'd announced that he wanted to leave. The last dates that he played with Iron Maiden during that phase were played with everyone knowing that Bruce was leaving the band.
We knew, we had a feeling, everyone had a feeling in the camp that he was going to do it, and we knew on a real live one on that tour that was probably going to be his last tour. It kind of felt like it. I think everybody knew that. So it was no surprise when he decided, because he'd already released a solo album, he'd written 2 books, you know, he's always been very hyper and stuff. So it wasn't that much of a surprise. We finished that tour, and then I know that the band did start rehearsing and interviewing people for the job, and putting them in, you know, giving them what's the word, auditions. So I actually had the Independent run a huge story on the auditions, which was quite hilarious, saying, you know, nobody knew, and we took them down, and we had like a half-page feature on it, you know, so who's going to fill the shoes, and then it was announced that Blaze was going to do it, and Blaze had been widely assumed by a lot of people to be lined up for the job. So a lot of people thought that we'd wound up the press, but in fact we hadn't. It just went that way. It was the band were auditioning a lot of people, and they did audition Blaze, and yeah, they ended up taking Blaze on board. But you know, everyone sort of thought it was a done deal. It wasn't.
The first album that Blaze sang on was X Factor, and there was a great deal of anticipation for that album because there was a 3-year gap between Fear of the Dark and X Factor, which was at the time the longest gap Iron Maiden had left between making a studio album. That was partly down to the fact that Blaze had a bike crash and things got put back. But obviously, you know, that they had to come back with a strong album, and it was a new singer, so there's a lot of attention. And just the fact there's a new frontman means there's a lot to be proved again. And I think people's reaction to that album was quite guarded. I don't think anyone came out at the time and went, "This is rubbish." And it wasn't a rubbish album. You know, it had some good points. But I think it was a hard Iron Maiden album to get into. It was very long. It was very dark. Steve Harris will tell you that he'd gone through a divorce at the time and was very affected by that. He'd also wrote a lot of very dark songs about the Gulf War, which was going on during that period. So it was a dark-sounding album, and although a lot of people have made comparisons between Bruce's voice and Blaze's voice, there are similarities, but Blaze just hasn't got the vocal range of Bruce. You can hear crossover in the voice, but, and maybe I'm being quite harsh saying this, it's all in one key.
And Blaze Bayley, as a vocalist, is very, very different to Bruce Dickinson, much like Bruce Dickinson was different to Paul Di'Anno. Here you had a man who had a very deep voice, you know, very kind of rich, and he can't hit the high notes as well as Bruce Dickinson can, but he has that kind of deep richness to his voice that was, in a sense, compelling and also difficult to imagine how he could sing those songs. So it was to prove a very, very tough era for the band, and the Blaze Bayley era came crashing in, and with it brought a lot of negativity and a lot of division between fans.
Now, a lot of people, with hindsight, were critical of that choice. Whether people were so critical at the time, I don't remember. I certainly don't remember that they were. And for all the bad points that people always seem to bring up about Blaze Bayley, the one thing that I would say is no one else at that time, when Maiden needed a Bruce Dickinson replacement, or to this day, have ever actually said, well, Blaze Bayley was the wrong choice because they should have got this person or that person. You know, they were intent that they had to remain a British band, they wanted a British singer, and there wasn't anyone else out there to do the job. So Blaze Bayley turned up and did his best. We can now say that his best wasn't good enough, which is why Bruce eventually rejoined the band. But there wasn't anyone else out there who could have done a better job, and I still don't hear anyone coming up with an alternative that could have become Iron Maiden's front man and continued their glory when Blaze joined them in the mid-1990s.
After a long period of touring, the band went back to the studio to record their 1998 album, Virtual 11.
So Blaze's second album is Virtual 11, and by this time people have started to become critical of Iron Maiden because the sales of tickets have been diminishing, and it wasn't only the case that people were slightly disappointed with the previous album, they were also slightly disappointed with the performance that Blaze was giving. And he'll admit, and the band will admit, that he wasn't 100% every night, which is not good enough, you know, by Iron Maiden standards. I think the other problem that kind of made people, if you like, rise up and start being critical was the fact that Bruce Dickinson had left Iron Maiden and had made rock albums, but they sounded different to Iron Maiden. By the time Virtual 11 came out, he'd decided that he wanted to go back to making metal albums and had actually made one album at that point and then released another one before rejoining Maiden that sounded like Iron Maiden albums extensively. So people were going, well, Bruce is doing this solo stuff sounding like Iron Maiden, and we've got Iron Maiden, who are our actual favourite band, but we're not too happy with what they're churning out. And I don't think Blaze can completely take the blame here, because some of the songs that were on the Virtual 11 album just weren't really good songs. I mean, the first single from that album was a 10-minute track. They did an edit to 6 minutes, but the actual album version was 10 minutes, called The Angel and the Gambler. Where they do actually sing, don't you think I'm a saviour, don't you think I can save you, don't you think I can save your life, 25 times. Now, you know, people are going to start to go, Bruce isn't doing that on his albums, maybe they should get back together again. So I think Steve Harris always maintains that it was seen as a necessity that there needed to be a change of frontman. But he'll tell you that by no means was it decided that Blaze goes and Bruce comes back. They looked at other people, there are different options that were considered, but at the end of the day, Bruce proved to be the best one.
With Bruce back in the band, the reunited Maiden began a world tour in July 1999, and later in the year started rehearsing for the next album. In 2000, the band released Brave New World, which gave them a top 10 single with The Wicker Man.
Iron Maiden rejuvenated themselves really around the time of the Brave New World album, because they set themselves up to have something to prove. When Bruce first rejoined the band, they did a tour of Europe. They didn't actually do any UK or US dates, and it was like a greatest hit set. So everyone that saw that or heard about it loved it, because Bruce was back, they were playing all the hits again, most of which they hadn't been playing with Blaze, and it was like, right, we're back on track. But even before they did that tour, they'd all said, well, Bruce is back in the band and we are going to do a new album, but we're not going to rest on our laurels, because if it just becomes about playing the back catalogue, then it's cabaret as far as we're concerned. So they said, you know, we need to make a great album, and we need to prove that we can still make good albums that will sell, and then we'll be back on an even keel. So they set up a great level of anticipation themselves, went into the studio with Kevin Shirley as the producer, who had not worked with them before, and made Brave New World, and people heard that, and The Wicker Man was the first single, and people generally were like, wow, you know, Iron Maiden are back. I think I spoke to someone from their record label who was getting me a copy of The Wicker Man, and I was really excited to hear it, and then she'd heard it, and I was like, what is it like? And she just said to me, it's Iron Maiden as I remember them. And that was what it was like for everyone, really.
If we felt that the quality of what we were doing in any area was slipping because we couldn't do it anymore, we would quit. It's as simple as that, because we're not going to accept second best. The great thing is that being a musician, you can carry on playing for a long, long time. Live, I don't know. You know, I mean, we're good to go for a few years yet.
Bruce Dickinson is like this massive ball of energy, although he's not actually that massive because he's quite a short man, but just so much energy for everything that comes his way, be it singing in Iron Maiden, writing songs, writing books, flying airplanes, presenting radio shows, whatever, you know. And he's always got a new concept of something that he wants to try, or some new project that's on the go. And I think that kind of vibrant edge was maybe something that was certainly missing from Iron Maiden in the years when he wasn't there. Because it was certainly around in the 80s during his first phase, and he's definitely back now. And I think out of all of the members of Iron Maiden, he'd probably be the one that missed it the most when the day comes that Iron Maiden aren't around, because he really does get a thrill out of being the front man with that band and putting out new albums to prove that they can still do it and getting on the stage. I mean, I'm sure all the members of the band will miss it when the day comes that Iron Maiden are no longer a working band. But I think for Bruce, it'll be the hardest. He'll be the one that takes it the hardest.
But the brains behind Iron Maiden and the driving force behind the band's success over 3 decades is undeniably Steve Harris.
Steve Harris is a very focused person. He's a very driven person. He always had this vision of what the band would be, and he's made it happen, and he's kept it on track, I think. And he's obviously the principal songwriter at the beginning, still writes the bulk of the material, loves playing. This is one of their great strengths. They really genuinely do enjoy getting up there and playing. There was, in the early 80s, there was some dissident murmurings about him being Sergeant Major Harris, giving Peyton this figure of being quite a draconian, wanting to rule the... And he couldn't have been wanted a control freak, and he couldn't be further from the truth. I've always found that, I've spent a lot of time on the road with them, and there's no question of it like, oh, it's my band and you're just... They've always been very democratic. Decisions are made as a group, talking, and they haven't changed in that respect.
Most people view Iron Maiden as being Steve Harris's band. There might be some members of Iron Maiden that take issue with that, but I think extensively, if you were going to pick a pivotal band member, then it would be Steve, because he formed the band, he came up with the name. There's a lot of songwriting that's been shared, but he certainly had more songwriting credits than any other member of Iron Maiden throughout the years. And he is really a driving force. He's certainly always been the one that stuck to his guns and never compromised, and I think has had a very moral judgment of what he considers Iron Maiden to be. And if someone else disagrees, he'll listen to that point of view, but it doesn't matter because it's not his and it's not their band. And I think that kind of dogmatic single-mindedness has meant that Iron Maiden have lasted as long as they have and have also kept their reputation intact.
The 2003 album, Dance of Death, brought the band back to the forefront of heavy metal and was a resounding success.
The new album is certainly the best they've made for years. It's certainly the best they've made since Seventh Son. And I think what it does is it takes Iron Maiden into the future and it secures their future. Now, Iron Maiden have already said, they announced prior to the release of this album, that they would not be touring quite as much in the near future. Now, people would speculate on that and say, OK, that's them saying, you know, we might want to give it up in a few years' time. Certainly, it's debatable as to whether that's going to happen in the future. But Dance of Death definitely secures their futures as, you know, one of the titans of heavy metal.
Iron Maiden's unprecedented commercial success for almost a quarter of a century has surprised critics and fans alike.
Well, it's amazing, really. I mean, obviously we're popular because we sell a lot of records, you know, but we're just not commercial in the sense of being commercial. So, you know, obviously the sounds we make are not deemed nice enough for human consumption on the Radio 1. But what can you do, you know? I mean, we've done it without them, so the mind boggles that if we'd have had radio play as well, what we'd have done even, you know, after that, you know. So, I don't know. And it's a shame, I think, more lots of bands like us because we still do well. We've got a great following. But I mean, new bands, you know, they've just got no chance.
Iron Maiden's success and their longevity, I think, is purely down to the attitude that the band emanates. They've never chased any trends. A lot of them are probably blissfully unaware of what is currently popular within the heavy metal genre. Because they don't care. They're Iron Maiden, they're very good at what they do, and they make sure that, you know, if you buy an Iron Maiden album, it's the best they can make, and by and large, throughout the 13 albums they've released, they have all been really good albums. More to the point, in the live arena, I think is where, you know, that they do their best business, because they're a band that you don't get to see on the TV and you don't hear on the radio. You might read about in the press occasionally, but if you go and see an Iron Maiden show, you're in for a good night, and obviously, you know, that's the best way that they can communicate what they do with anyone who wants to buy a ticket to turn up to see them. And they've always made sure that wherever and whenever they've played, they've put on great shows.
Maiden has always worked differently to many, many other bands. We do have a very, very intense and loyal fan base, which is why we try and treat them well, because we don't want to mess them about, because they've never messed us around. You know, even if we've made records which, you know, are maybe a variable quality, and let's face it, everybody's going to, they've still been, you know, supportive in the same way that, you know, you support a soccer team, you know, if they're not doing that great in the league, you know.
It's travelling around, and it's been like word of mouth. There's magazines have, you know, been writing about the band. I mean, there's been a few places that played on the radio, but I think it's surely through hard touring, and I think that's, you know, one of the reasons. We spend a lot of time in each country, really, and playing all the places. And it's been a thing that has built up over, you know, it's not been overnight, it's been over 20 years now the band's been going. So it's been a thing that's a process of time.
I think Iron Maiden have become a major success because it's a complete package. If you like it, you can equate it really with some of the dance music marketing. It's a brand. There's more than just the music. There's, you know, I mean, obviously with all of that rock music through the 80s, the way people dressed was important. The hair was important, but Iron Maiden took it one stage further. Eddie, I think, was just an absolute brilliant stroke. You know, it's that whole concept of, it's a bit like Motorhead. You can tell a Motorhead fan straight away. You can tell an Iron Maiden fan straight away. You know, they're people that identify with the band, and the band give them something back to identify with. I mean, it's a bit of a soapbox issue of mine, really, that a lot of the bands that we're seeing coming out now, I mean, are so faceless.
I think it's just a bit of everything. Well organised, management's well organised, the promotion is well organised, and I think the songs, the way they've worked on them with the riffs, with Steve working on the riffs, and I think that's the magic of what they've come through.
I think the thing about Maiden is they've been successful for two reasons. Firstly, because they were a very, very good group who didn't sell out. And secondly, because they've had very, very good management. And they've actually done everything right. And around them, because of that, has built up this incredible business, which is now, it's spawned, Smallwood Taylor's spawned Sanctuary, which is now one of the most successful conglomerates in the music business. So it's only because they stayed true to what they believed in.
Well, I think Iron Maiden have been so successful because one, and number one, the most important is that they've delivered to the audience, the fans. There's a good show. I think probably more live than studio now, to be quite honest with you. But they are an entity unto themselves. It's like Planet Maiden. It's like everything goes on around that, and it's fantastic. It's really good to see.
I always remember Iron Maiden as being great mavericks, as being people who had their vision and stuck to it, who created exciting music, who wouldn't compromise, who wouldn't sell out, and who are one of the great rock and roll bands of our time.
Maiden's still number one. Still number one. May not sell the records as much as they used to, but they still do the tours, and the tours are worth going to see. You know, Maiden is still the top metal band in the world. Forget Metallica and stuff like that. These are still number one. And that's over things like the Stones and everything, you know, like the top rock band. And I'm proud to be from that. That's great. So, long live Maiden.
After nearly 25 years and almost 50 million album sales, Iron Maiden are now rightly regarded as the classic British heavy metal band. And hopefully, that's where they intend to stay for many more years to come.